Hello. That was very weak. Hello, everyone. How's it going? Thank you for spending time with us this afternoon. I just want to warn you that I have very little idea about what I'm doing. I'm learning about Docker. I've only been doing it for about 5 years. So I'm going to make mistakes. And there are things about Docker that I always forget. How many hyphens you need on each command line, dash dash this, or sometimes it's 2 dashes, sometimes it's 4. I don't know. So there's going to be mistakes. And if anyone, of course, says, no, that was stupid, you shouldn't do it that way, please yell it out and we'll all learn together. Because they want to see 20 years of Docker experience on your LinkedIn. And I don't have that. So I'm doing the best I can. I do have some spicy hot bits where I literally called people back in Redmond at Microsoft and got something working like 5 minutes ago. And it's so cool that I got it working that I actually didn't shut my computer down. You ever get a demo working and you don't even close the lid. You just bring it down with the lid open because you don't want to piss it off. So it's working, it's cool, it's new. But I don't know whether or not there are folks in the room who are expecting a super expert Docker talk or not. So are there any super expert Docker people in the room? Super experts? No? You were like maybe thinking, that's a tough one. No? Okay. Who's doing it in production, though, for money? And not an expert. You just fooled your bosses. They're paying you anyway. You have no idea what you're doing, but you're cashing checks. Excellent. Very nice. Or doing ACHs or whatever you all do down here. We still write checks in the US because we suck. Okay. My name is Scott Hanselman. This is my blog, and this is my podcast. This is the advertising portion of the show. Please check out my podcast. I've been doing it for 900 episodes. Lots of cool people doing lots of cool stuff over the last 17 years, every single Thursday. There's even some Docker shows in there, so be sure to check it out. This is only like shows in the 800s, and I could scroll like that for the entire hour. So please do check out the podcast if you like fresh tech and fresh technology. And then if I have a low blood sugar, somebody can just kind of yeet some orange juice up at me, and we'll do the best we can to not die on stage. Let's just be watching my blood sugar right here. This is my current folder. I'm in a folder right now called Pants. This is the current version of .NET that I'm running, and that's my blood sugar, which if it goes like into the 80s, then you just let me know. Just holler at me. Okay, you're going to watch for it, and then we'll figure that out. Cool. So Docker when I say Docker, I want to make sure we're clear. I'm talking about containers and what's called OCI, but I'm using the word Docker the way we use like Kleenex to mean tissue or Xerox, right? It's just one of those things where Docker is now the word. So I realize that it's not technically correct, but it means like containers, containerd, and things like that. There's a whole storied history of those kind of things. But just like Twitter is Twitter. Even if Twitter dies, I'm still going to tweet on other platforms. I'll tweet on Threads, and I'll tweet on Facebook, and I'll tweet on Mastodon. So we're taking over the word Docker, whether the company is around or not. So I'm referring to it in the generic sense. In the old days, 21 years ago, I was working at a banking company, and we had daily builds of our banking software, and it was very complicated. We had the transaction processor, we had the web API, we had the front-end website, we had the back-end admin, and it was actually a collection of multiple processes. When you put it into production, it's called Carillion Voyager, and it ran things like ANZ for a while, and it was like a minimum of 5 machines to work. And then in a demo scenario for a salesperson, they would basically use one 30-gig virtual machine. And this is back in the days where Hyper-V was just starting out and virtual machines were still magic. And we would go and have a daily build of the system, and it would pop out this 30-gigabyte VHD, virtual hard drive, and people would then copy it down. It took forever. But the salespeople thought that was amazing. Like, look, this is a daily build. I'm running an entire bank right here. Why were we shipping a virtual machine? Like, I could have shipped them laptops. Like, we could have put together a system where we had a bunch of physical machines. We put them like in FedEx containers and shipped the physical laptop, and they would open it up. It would have a standard password. That's effectively what we did, right? We just did it virtually. It included Windows Server 2000 and whatever, 2000, 2003. All of that was included. It was 30 gigs. It included Notepad. It included solitaire, and all of those important files that Windows Server ships with that makes your application run. So we didn't really think anything about that, right? It was a different time. It was the early 2000s, and we would just ship the whole thing. It was physically shipping a machine, except it was virtually shipping a machine. The machine doesn't know that it's not a real. It doesn't know that it's been uploaded. If you've seen that show on Amazon Prime where the guy dies and then they upload his brain and he lives in paradise and he doesn't really know that he's uploaded into the matrix. The virtual machines don't know. They don't care. But the business person cares because they got a working machine at the end of every day. And this is pre-containerization. We automated the whole thing with PowerShell. And I've actually got a whole paper about this that you can go and read about if you like historical nonsense. Automating large distributed system, Hanselman, PDF, PowerShell, I'm guessing. Managing large-scale system deployment and configuration with PowerShell, right? So you can see all of these historical artifacts of things that don't exist anymore, like subversion and cruise control and endcover, right? It was very revolutionary for the time, 20 plus years ago. And this is what chief architects do. Mostly has boxes and lines, right? The more architecty you get, the more boxes and the more lines. And these lines don't even mean anything. They're just scribbles on the page here. And then XML. This is basically YAML for the younger people. This is YAML, but it uses angle brackets instead of white space, and it's easier to read. Okay? But literally nothing has changed, right? And we would do desired state configuration, and it was really cool, and we would set the whole thing up. Now, the reason I'm telling you that is philosophically, we didn't think about the fact that we were shipping this giant virtual machine with solitaire. What would have been the right thing to do? We would strip solitaire out, right? Maybe we'd install Windows, we'd run a script, and we'd remove solitaire. We'd keep Candy Crush, but we would remove some of the other things because it's banking software. The question is, though, are you removing them because they are security issues? Are you removing it because it's a philosophical issue? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to ship solitaire, right? Then they had Windows Server Core, if you'll recall, which was Windows Server that shipped without a GUI, which was an attempt at doing just that, but it was still like 8 or 9 gigs. However, the correct thing that we would have done, and this technology didn't really exist 20 years ago, would have been to run the application, observe it, and look at all the functions that the application called, because this is .NET code. It's .NET code console.writeLine, HTTP client.open, all of those kind of things. And they are managed code that are ultimately going to call Win32 code, right? So console.writeLine is a managed piece of code running in C# that's going to call into Win32k.sys or something and say, I want to write out to the console, and then the console has to decide if it puts it in a text file or whatever. We would look at all the different apps, all the different functions, look at what they called, and if we could, we would remove all the functions we didn't use. Think about that for a second. There's like, what, 32,000 or 40,000 different potential functions you could call on Windows, and maybe we only used like 1,500, right? It'd be like shipping a person with a limited vocabulary, right? You just can't say that stuff because you never say those things. So you would ship a tree-trimmed version of Windows. You'd shake Windows really hard until all of the parts fell out that you were not actually using, and then you'd end up with a custom version of Windows that only worked just for that application. And that'd be cool. It'd have a smaller surface area. It would be a physically smaller thing. It would be awesome and a good deal, right? So if I were now, though, in the modern world, to make an application, this is, I think, a console app. Let's see what I got here. I'm using a couple of things. I like to share like silly things that I've added that you might enjoy. So right here, I've got, of course, my cool prompt, which is using Oh My Posh. Some people use cat, but I use bat because it's better. And bat is like a better cat, and it gives you coloring and like cool ASCII art. I'm a sucker for ASCII art. So if anyone ever wants me to like promote their open source project or whatever, and then you go and you send me like, here's a thing, look at our project, it's so smart, look, it does this. I will never promote it. But if you say, hey, look at our project, it looks like this, I'm like, oh my God, that is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm going to talk about that immediately, okay? Someone sent me a text editor, it looked like this, and I was like, oh yeah, we're back, baby. Look at that. Seriously, everyone is all talking about 3D shaders and like, what can you do on an NVIDIA 4080? And I'm like, what can you do with ASCII art? Like, impress me with your ASCII art. If you have a colorful ASCII progress bar, you're going to succeed in open source. I just want you to know that. It's true. You can do like I love a rainbow progress bar. Can we just go with, I mean, come on. Isn't that just wonderful? Rainbow progress bar. Okay. What the hell was I talking about? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, and I also make colorful, this is my Beyonce theme for my directory, and it's got like purples and pinks. It's good. Okay, so what does our application do? Okay, it's going to just spin through and do a counter and then delay a millisecond and say count this and that. It doesn't really do anything. Say .NET run, 1,1000, 2, 1,000. It's complaining, don't worry about that. And then it's just going to count. So this is just a better than hello world kind of a thing. And if I go and say .NET publish, it's going to go and build the thing, and it's going to put it into this folder right here. So then if I go and say, look at that folder, I'm going to just kind of remind you of the different things that I'm using to move around quickly. I typed start, and then I pasted in that folder name. You can see that we ended up with a tiny little executable file that is 138K. That's not all of .NET. That's just that one file. The .NET has to be installed on the machine. I think I would need to go and say .NET publish. I think it's OS Windows Arch x64. This is a guess. Someone remind me. Someone in the room knows. Arch Win dash? That would be -R, I think. Let's try it. I don't think that's right. I think it's like this. I have to go and Google with Bing for how to do that. No, okay, and then I want to do self-contained. People are watching in the room, and it's scary, but it's fine. And the internet at the hotel is slow, and nothing changed. Another folder? Ah, thank you. Ooh, things have been happening and I wasn't looking. Whoa, look at that. So that shipped the same pants and copied all of the DLLs over. So it gave me a private self-contained build of .NET. Now in the old days, .NET was like 4 gigs in a reboot. Now it's not quite 4 gigs in a reboot. There's no reboots. And if we look at this, Control A, right click, and property, going too fast, right? I don't like this, this table is like bent, and it's throwing me off, friends. Sorry about that. People say that, like, blame the demo gods. No, you blame the table. Okay, so that's 70 megs. But all the thing does is console.writeLine task and print something else. Like I don't need 70 megs to do that. And this is where people usually start tweeting about it and writing Microsoft with a $ and talking about how everyone who works on .NET is stupid or whatever, right? This needs to be trimmed. We would need to do tree trimming on this. And that's cool. These are additional things that we can do. So you go .NET publish, tree trimming, .NET 8. I'm Googling with Bing. Publish, trim, blah, blah, blah. Reading the docs live on stage. Trim mode full. That's cool. Come back over here to the thing. Go like that. Open up pants. Come in here. What an anachronism Hanselman is. Visual Studio Code exists, but this idiot feels the need to use this editor just because it's excessive. That's fine. Let me delete that and do it again. I don't feel like that trimmed. I'm not feeling trimmed right now. Show more items. Still 70 megs. That's probably because I didn't read the documentation. Because there's a whole thing. Trim mode, partial. Anyone know what the hell's going on? Publish trimmed. True. Notepad. Anyone else do this when they're coding? I think it's better. Do you all just just sit in silence with your own head? I'm honestly wondering. Are you bopping along to music or something like that? Yeah, a little Lady Gaga. Oh, optimizing assemblies for size. This process might take a while. All right. Ooh, what? All right. So now it's not hundreds of things and hundreds of megs. It's 26 things and 17 megs. Yes, it's not C. No, it's not a contest to see if you could make a 3K file. Like, I get it, but it's still pretty cool. There's still a jitter. There's still a lot going on there. You've still got garbage collection. We are still shipping IL, and this is important. I want to make sure we understand this. 20 years ago, we did IL, intermediate language, and we still do it now. In fact, I can't remember where the file is. It was called ildasm. Sounds like an album, ildasm. But it's actually a specific file, and I can never remember how to do it, and I don't know how to search for files on Windows, because anytime you could be looking at a file, it's that file, and then you go into Windows Explorer, and you type in file.txt, no files exist. I can see it. I know ildasm exists on the disk, but it's going to end up searching. Where is it? Like people are asking where it is. I don't know. So I go into DOS. This is DOS. And I type in, go find ildasm. I just search the entire disk. I know this about myself. I've done it my whole life. I always forget where it is. Now I know there's 9 of them. I should just make a batch file or put it in the path, but that would make too much sense. So instead, I just look for it every time. I know this about myself. And then I go like this, and then I paste it. And I paste it. Back over here. Clear, paste, / ildasm. Oh, and then I remember I need a quote because it's got things in. And then I go like this. And then I ask myself why I'm doing this live on stage. And then I'm transported back into the late 90s when ildasm runs on one of these monitors. Pause for effect. This is the part. What's that? Gotta put the @ symbol? Why? I don't think that's a thing. @ space, ampersand. Escandalo. Good job. That was very nice. Thank you for that. So it just ran and then went away? Oh, you're right, it did. Very nice. Thank you for that. Okay, and now I'm transported back into these days. Doesn't this look great? It's wonderful. All right, so now we're going to go File, Open. I'm going to hit PWD for Print Working Directory. Grab that folder right there, drop into Pants, Bin, Release, .NET 8, Win, Pants, Pants.dll, Program, zoom in. Look at that. Okay? So that is non-committal intermediate language. We compiled our C# or our F# or our IL, or our VB rather, into intermediate language, but we haven't committed to a processor yet. We're not committing to x64 or x86 or even ARM. We are non-committal in what we're doing right now. The thing that will make the decision of this will be the jitter. And the jitter can do this many times. It can think about things. It can actually start up really fast and then get smarter the longer it runs. So if you're running a for loop and it fires it up as fast as it can, starts talking to that for loop, and then 300, 400 times through the for loop, it's like, I could do better. It's going to actually go and try again in multiple stages and then swap the function out for its new, faster one. Isn't that cool? Yeah, it's a multi-stage jitter. But you could say, well, why don't you just compile ahead of time, right, instead of just in time? So you can do that. You can use AOT, or ahead of time compilation, which makes sense because if you know you're going to be running on Linux, you know you're going to be running on Docker, whatever, you can go and say AOT .NET 8, and then we can go and find the thing to turn that on, publish AOT true, go back out to the command line. Actually, I think we already have it open in Notepad. Publish AOT, go back over here. Let's do our .NET publish. See if that works. Oh, can't run it because it's open in the old thing. Close it. Thank you. Appreciate you. Generating native code. Whee. So it's making a decision. It's making a commitment now. So now, if I go over there, look at that. Now we have pants, and it's 1.5 meg. It is not a .NET app. I can't open that in ILDASM anymore. I could disassemble it, but it's now committed. But it's pants.exe. So what did we end up deciding on? I think we decided that this was going to be Win64, WinX64, right? If I wanted to say Linux ARM or Linux x64, it would be different. So when you're going and publishing your application, you have to think about, like, how long is it going to take to start up? Does it matter that it takes a while to start up? Do I want those cool optimizations where .NET is going to go and run that Jitter multiple times and make better decisions? Do I want a garbage collector or not? Is it a simple application? Then we also have to think about things like reflection, where your application is calling functions in a late bound way. If I say console.writeLine, I know I'm saying console.writeLine. The compiler knows it. Any analyzers or static analyzers know it. And they can go to that application and trim all the console.read lines, because I don't need to ship that function. I never called it. But if I used reflection to dynamically call console.readLine, then it would fail because I trimmed it away. Right? You made it go away. You disappeared it. So I'm telling you all of this because there's so many ways that one could potentially go and publish for Linux, for Windows, for Raspberry Pi, for whatever. You can publish AOT. You can publish what are called ready to run, which are like most of the stuff is AOT and most of it's pre-jitted, but not all of it. There's whole levels. It's like apples, applesauce, apple juice, and it's just how long do you keep the blender going and what are you ultimately going to ship? Because you all like pulp, I understand. Is this a thing in Australia? Australians love their pulp. You guys want to chew your orange juice, right? Americans are just so spoiled that they're like, no pulp in anything. And now we have an array of pulp options. I don't know, do you all have this? We literally have like 5 different choices in orange juice pulp. But you all don't. You just want to chew the food. It's basically an orange that you've plopped directly out of an orange juice container. .NET provides a similar array of pulp options, and all the way down to juice that has been completely done ahead of time. So what if we go here and we say .NET publish, hang on, publish, I think it is publish container, publish profile, default container. Okay, check this out. I can publish now from .NET, not just to a file, but I can actually publish directly to Docker. I don't even need Docker to do it. I could have Docker not installed on my machine, and if I have like a remote registry, a container registry, which is kind of like RSS for Docker images, you can, it's kind of what it is, you can publish directly from .NET up into Docker, and then, you know, Google Cloud or Amazon or whatever could go and download that container image, and it would go and run. You don't even need a Docker file, which is a description of what Docker is going to do. You just publish. So that's pretty cool. But I like Docker files because I like to drive stick shift. And I think that everyone should drive stick shift once, right? In a world of Uber, where they just pick you up and take you places, you should still change your oil, you know, and change your tires and stuff like that. Just once, just to know what it's like. So a Docker file is all about layers, and it's really hard for people to like visualize this. Like, you know that they exist. You're an expert in Docker. You're a self-proclaimed expert. You get money for it. I saw you raise your hand before. They show you this, and they figure that you're supposed to understand it. And I find it confusing. Basically, what you're doing is you're coming up with this layered file system, just like I was mentioning about how I used to ship VHDs, virtual hard drives. You can go into Windows. I know I'm not a Linux person, but you can go into Windows, and I could go into disk management, okay? And I could say, action, create VHD. People don't know they can do this. Action, come on, action, create VHD. This is a VHD.VHD. Browse, desktop. I guess I call it pants. Everything's called pants now on my hard drive. I don't know why. It used to be called poop, and then someone complained. I had an actual formal complaint with someone at work, and it was a VP at work who said, I see that Hanselman persists in using poop as a variable name, and it's unprofessional. So I sent him a poop emoji. But that's actually a true thing. And I actually, you ever have to call your boss and like warn them? I have a relationship with my boss, Scott Hunter, where I don't even have to tell him that something bad is coming. I just text him, incoming. And he just gets ready to defend me from, you know, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. And then the guy says, hey, Hanselman is using inappropriate variable names. And then he says, I'll take care of it. And then he puts it in the round file, which is the trash can. So pants.vhd, I can double click on that and I can mount it, right? And that is now a 2 gig file. I haven't initialized this one. It's literally, I just made an empty container. Okay, that's what I did 20 years ago. And then you start copying stuff on it and you boot off of it. Windows users who have been around for a long time know that they can even boot from VHD. So instead of having dual booting machines where you have a partition and a partition, you can have a partition and then just boot off of VHD. These are layers, just like layers were in are in Docker, except 20 plus years ago. Now in Docker, you can say, I want to start from nothing. I just made a VHD. I could say from, and I could use a word called scratch. This is a really interesting way to learn how to do Docker. You literally say from scratch, and you have an empty layer with nothing. No assumption about operating system, no assumption about anything. It's just an empty container, an empty layer. And then each line is a new layer. So right here, we're going to start from the .NET SDK version 8. That is itself a Docker file. This is where it gets a little confusing. So I could go and search for that and find their Docker file, which would then build on others. Oops, Google. No, I'm not going to sign in. Go away. So we can find these Docker files. Now, what I would end up doing is Googling and then going to the Docker Hub and then getting its Docker file, and then I would find that it built on top of Ubuntu, and then I would have to find their Docker file, and I would find that there was a hierarchy. It's Docker files all the way down. That's a hard way to learn. So instead, there's a thing called dive. Let's see if this works. Dive. Did I call this one? Did I build this Docker file? Let's go .NET. What did I call it? Docker images. Did we call it pants? Pants. Dive into pants. Dive pants. Okay? Love it. Look at that. Why am I using this, people? Ask yourself why Hanselman has chosen this tool. ASCII art. Now, what does this tool need? Color. More ASCII. Emoji was the right answer, but I will also accept more color. Okay, so what's cool about this is Dive, and you can download this, will show you each of the layers, and then you can click on each of those layers and see what's going on and look at the actual file system. So you can see that the pants container image here has a folder called app. I've mounted it with the dive tool here. You can see the pants.dll and the pants.exe in that folder. But this is the part that I think is so cool, and it makes it so much easier to visualize this stuff. Look, it's got an Etsy folder, not Etsy like the eBay, but Etsy like etc. And it's got lib or lib, and it's even got a home folder. So it's a real little Linux distribution. Cool. So what if I did something like do dive Ubuntu? Look at that. So this is the Ubuntu image, and it's basically all of Ubuntu, all that stuff. But is that what I want to ship? I just want to say hello world. I just want to say console.writeline. Do I ship all of Ubuntu? We can actually see if we say Docker. So this is another thing, by the way. I type .NET, D-O-T-N-E-T, and I type Docker all the time. And if I remember correctly, I find myself typing docket all the time. And I couldn't decide if I meant .NET or if I meant Docker. when I type docket. So if I recall, I actually made a batch file called docket.bat, because when I type docket, it runs Docker. Right, and that saves me fractions of seconds every year. And those fractions of seconds add up to fractions of minutes every year. And that's how you're more productive, my friends. Yeah. Now, of course, the right thing to do would be to be competent, which is another way that I could improve my work, but I am, in fact, not competent. Okay, I'm going to say Docker run, and I'm going to run Ubuntu. I think this is another great way to like learn stuff. You literally just install Docker, you say Docker run Ubuntu. This is Ubuntu. I could then run my .NET application manually. If I had it in the app folder there, I could copy stuff in. But what do I not need to run my Docker app in production if I were going to ship it on Ubuntu? What do I not even need? I don't need probably half of this stuff. There's libraries I never call. Here's a revolutionary idea. Do I need the shell? Right? Like in production, do you need to shell into production? If you do, by the way, you're a bad person. It's like if anyone was like, yes, you do. I shush into production all the time. Do y'all do that? Do you shush? SSH? Do you say SSH or do you say shush? Why? I've been trying to get this to be a thing for what, 15 years, people? Okay, so I want to give you a little tip. Because you're here at NDC, because you're at a conference, you are better than your coworkers who chose to stay at work right now. This is a Wednesday. They could be here, but you are bettering yourself, so you're better than them. So I want you at the meeting later this week when you show up to just throw out, just like, yeah, you know, I was shushing into that machine. And then, but do it naturally, so they don't know that you know this. And then see if they start, oh, is that how it's pronounced? And then casually in other meetings, they'll be shushing around into virtual machines and shushing here and there. And then we'll get it to become a thing, and it'll just be our little secret, okay? How do you all say this? Schmod, right? You schmod it to executable, no? Do you say chmod? No. Chmod, with the hard ch. Yeah. Did you just make that up, or do you really say that? You hit it hard? It would be funny if you were talking at a normal like pace, and you're, I'm just going to go and chmod that and just hit it really hard. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's almost like there's an implied apostrophe there, like Klingon. Like it's a Klingon word. I'm like, chmod. Okay, so we're chmodding into that, and we're shushing around. And then the other one is, I say cube cuddle. What do you say? Cube cuddle is allowed, right? Did I get that one right? You spell out CTL. It's cube cuddle. It is actually, this is completely unambiguous. No, it's cube cuddle. That's how it is. Okay. I am running right now SH. I'm running shell. We shipped it in this container in user bin SH. I could safely delete it, and my app would still run because it's not needed. What would be a reason to not ship SH? Security. Because if I don't ship it, then they can't run it, and then they can't run shell scripts, which is a thing that they shouldn't be doing, right? I don't want people to do that kind of stuff. So every function, every utility, everything that I don't ship, not just in my app, because you saw me shake my app and trim it and then generate native code, is reducing surface area. If I don't ship functions in .NET, then they can't call those functions. If I don't ship parts in Ubuntu that are parts of the operating system, I'm literally limiting what are called syscalls. In Windows world, it's like Win32, APIs. System calls, there's hundreds of them. Just ship the ones that you need. So Ubuntu has done this really cool thing called Ubuntu, and I love this. They're good at naming stuff. These are chiseled. I don't know how to spell chiseled. Images. Ubuntu chiseled. There you go. Chiseled images for containers. Okay? So what these are is they are smaller images that have removed everything that a typical web app doesn't need. And then we can go and build on top of those. And the .NET team and the folks that work on Docker for .NET have a ton of different images. And they actually are so small. This is a kind of a clever name. They call them distroless. Because they're basically not even shipping Ubuntu at that point. They're just shipping functions, and they're just shipping the absolute freaking minimum that you can do to get your stuff. Now, what's neat about this is that you can change your Docker files by adding things at the end, basically adding tags. And you say, well, I want, and Ubuntu has cool names like Jammy and what are other ones? What's the other? What's that? Bullseye is one. These are different version numbers. So you're like, are you running Jammy or are you running Bullseye? This is all ways to make you feel bad about yourself because you don't know those code words. It's just a way for you to feel superior, which is what Unix people do. So you can say, I want the .NET SDK, but I want the Jammy edition. I want Jammy chiseled extra. This is literally like a version of this thing. What's cool, though, is you don't have to change your application. You don't have to change your application to do this. Now, we are starting to build this layer on the .NET SDK, and we're naming it as an alias, build environment. What's cool about this is that we're shipping the SDK, which means we can actually do the compilation inside the container. This means that you could actually not have .NET installed on your machine and run it with a specific version of the SDK inside the container, and then the result would then be published, in this case, to a folder called out. Okay? Then we take Jammy chiseled. That sounds like something you all would eat down here. What's that? I couldn't find Nutella. Is that not a thing anymore? I found Marmite. What is it called? Marmite? Vegemite. Horrible. No, I used it to caulk the tiles in the hotel room. Cleaned it up real nice. Couldn't find any Nutella though. So then we say, I don't want to use the .NET SDK. I don't want to ship that. I want to use the Jammy chiseled one. So this is the .NET runtime 8.0 on Jammy, which is a version of Ubuntu, and then chiseled, which ships only the functions that I want. And remember that we published from one container into a folder called out. We're going to copy from the container called build environment, the alias that we made before, from the folder called out into the folder called dot. Now that dot means the current working folder inside of our layer, which is in fact /app. So this container has nothing except a bunch of shared libraries from Ubuntu, a folder called app, and our stuff has been copied from out of one container, containers running, over into the file system another. It would be just like me making two VHDs, mounting them both C and D, building onto one, copying the results. And then entry point, this is the autoexec.bat for Docker, just to age me a little bit there, is going to call .NET pants.dll. Notice that it's not saying .NET run, because .NET run implies a build. That's an SDK thing. This is a .NET exec. It just says run that. And if this was an AOT situation, if this was an ahead of time compilation, then .NET pants.dll wouldn't be the thing. I would just say pants.exe, but I'm on Linux. I would just chmod it, +X, and then run pants, and it would just work. The entry point is right there. The container exists for no other reason than to do that one thing, to run that one thing. And I can use these tools like dive to better understand these different things. I can dive into the .NET app and see exactly what's going on. I can see there's a symlink there. You can see here's our home app. I can see how big the image size is, whether or not it's efficient. You can get these things down to really, really, really small. Now this is a pretty typical basic Docker file, but remember what I said before, just even knowing this is a lot. Like it's a lot of psychic weight. It's a lot of emotional things to have to remember. I don't need that anymore if I don't want to. If I want, I can just go .NET publish, and I can do it myself. I think I actually made a pants web and a pants worker. Here's pants worker. A worker thread is not a console app. It's like a worker that runs in the background. And I'm going to hit code dot. I'm going to open that up. And you can see here that I can put the container base image here. So there's no Docker file. I just say the base image is there, and I can change it whenever I want, Jammy chiseled or Jammy extra or whatever. It's .NET 8. And then in this folder, there is no Docker file, which is hot, right? So then we can go and say Docker run, what was it called? Pants worker? Yeah, so Docker create Docker pants worker, Docker PS, Docker run. I can never remember these things. Is it pants worker? Or I can never remember if I'm supposed to say the name of the thing, or if it did run. Okay, so it's running right now. It's doing its thing. We go over to Docker, the Docker desktop. We can see pants web, pants worker. I think it's so funny, you know, about this whole thing. Docker names, it takes an adjective and a famous scientist. And that's what it names. You don't name the container something creative like pants. It will go and call it elated Wozniak, or in this case, affectionate McCarthy. And McCarthy was an evil politician, but probably a very benevolent scientist that I'm not familiar with. But apparently they're an affectionate scientist. So if I click on affectionate McCarthy, I can see the logs and inspect what's going on inside of this. You can see it's running .NET pants worker. I can see if it's got its own file system. But now in Docker desktop on Windows, look, we can see the file system. This one is not as chiseled as I would like it to be. We can even go and run security things like Docker Scout and do image analysis on them to find out if, like, look at the item, not at my code, but at the images around it and see if there's any known vulnerabilities. And that's really cool. Okay? So now, if I go over to Pants Web, which is here, I'm going to say Docker run. And this is where a lot of people get their brains blown up as well, is that the Docker application, just like the virtual machine that I shipped around 20 years ago, doesn't know that it's in a container. It thinks it's a computer. And it'll go and open up a port. In this case, it'll open up port 8080, kind of local host. But it's not my computer. It's the computer inside my computer, right? It's like building a dollhouse inside of your house. And someone's looking in the window of your house, but they really mean to look into the window of the dollhouse, so you have to tunnel some way to do that. So you're saying here, I want port 8080 on the inside to point to port 8080 on the outside, and you're attaching the window of the dollhouse inside the house to the actual window outside the house. Does that make sense? So when we do that, now we go localhost 8080, and that hello world is elsewhere. It's inside of Docker. I can prove it by going into TCP view. I know that there's ways to do this in Linux, but we're not in Linux, and it's okay. And I'm going to go in PCP view, and I'm going to click on local port, and I'm going to scroll to the 8000 down here. And you can see Docker listening on port 80 and then allowing that to talk downwards, right? It's not IIS or Kestrel or Node or I can't identify the process. All it is it's the Windows process that then brokers the deal down. Windows is in this case acting as a reverse proxy and allowing that traffic to go down into the one that's listening underneath. All this port management can stress people out though. There's a lot going on. Additionally, you have to ask yourself, like, is it listening on all addresses? In this case, it's listening on IPv4 and IPv6 and all that kind of stuff, and DNS, and that's where container orchestration starts to happen. That's where things like Kubernetes starts to be a lot more useful. The other thing to think about is we're running on Linux here, right? On some kind of Linux, but I might not want to run on Linux. I might want to try something a little bit revolutionary. There's some things that are happening around WebAssembly that is interesting. Remember when I showed you that C# compiles into an intermediate language, and then intermediate languages then get just-in-time compiled or ahead-of-time compiled into something. And if I were to go and run something like, let me try here. Let's go up one. I think I have it in here. WASM console, CD. Nope, that's wrong. That's right. Code. I'm going to show you a console application that is program file. Okay, and this application is not going to say hello world. It's going to say hello, and then it's going to call a function called runtime information. .os description and runtime information, not framework description. So it'll say hello Windows or hello Mac, depending on what it's running on, okay? And I'm going to say, I think we said win, what was it you said, Isaac? Win-x64. Thank you, friends. Okay, .NET run. Okay, hello, Windows. This is the big lie, greatest lie Microsoft ever told. You're still running Windows 10. You're running Windows 10, and we're running Windows 11. The joke is that Windows 11 is going to be Windows 10 forever. Windows 15 will still be Windows 10. With love from, and then we have .NET. So we're running on .NET, and we're running on Windows. And if I ran it under Linux, we would see the exact same thing. We would see running under Linux x64 or something like that. Okay, but in here, just like I could say the Docker base container, I can have runtime identifiers like Windows on x64 or Linux on ARM. We could say, I want to run this on WebAssembly and the WebAssembly kind of interface. So this is the runtime and the interface, and that's like the operating system. This is where it's like a, why would you do this? We'll figure that part out in a minute, but it's still awesome. So let's talk about the awesome part, and then we'll talk about the why this would have a reason to be run. If we went from me shipping an entire copy of Windows in a 30 gig VHD to shipping containers, which are basically tiny virtual machines, not really, to distroless, shipping just the shared objects, the DLLs, that allow you to call just the functions that you want, then what else could we not ship? Could we even just not even ship an operating system? Or we could just go all the way down. So assembly language, we could just ship assembly language, right? And assembly language would physically talk to the hardware. But we don't do that anymore. No one writes assembly language anymore, certainly not for web applications. And no one thinks about how assembly interacts with hardware. Because I, as an old person, learned from the metal up, right? I started on, welcome to Computer Science 101, here's your soldering iron. That's where I learned, right? If I get an exception in .NET, I want to replace a capacitor. That's where it's a generational thing, okay? And that's a bias. That's an internal bias that I need to check in interacting with young people. By young people, I mean anyone under 50. I learned on the metal, like God intended, right? No one should be allowed to have a garbage collector until they've pop MX, comma, right? They get like move, like I want assembly language. I just want my kids to drive stick shift, and it's a bias, and I'm working on that. I need to go to some kind of an AA meeting or something and talk about it. How do young people learn? They don't learn from the metal. The young people learn from the glass of the monitor. Welcome. Push F11, or F12 rather, F12 tools. Oh my God, I'm looking at the source code of a website. Oh, I'm in the matrix. I've delved deep into the beast. And I'm like, oh, look, Mom, look, here's a website, F12. Ah! It's inside the computer, man. And I want to talk about V8 and I want to talk about JavaScript, right? Because right now, with you've seen all the crazy inception stuff that you can do, right? I'm on Windows and I run Chrome and I could then run JavaScript and then run WebAssembly and then run Windows 95 in a VM, in a box, on a web, you know what I mean? Like how far can we go? And you've seen people do that. Why? Because it's awesome. But if young people learn from the metal, from the glass going inward, then JavaScript, which is not the language that we deserve, but it is the language that we have, and its kind of friend, its partner, which is WebAssembly, becomes assembly language. It's the new assembly language. But assembly language is processor specific. I learned on 6502 assembly, which is, Sinclair's and Commodore 64s. And that assembly language is different than assembly language for an x64, which is different than an assembly language for an x86, right? You can learn like German, you can learn High German, you can learn Dutch, which sounds like German, like you can learn these are all flavors of the same kind of thing. Assembly is assembly, but it's all very region specific. So learning x86 assembly language doesn't do me any good if I'm going to ship a web application, and it's not going to help the young people at all because they don't do that anymore. So WebAssembly is assembly language for the internet, where the internet itself is the runtime. And in this case, there are these WebAssembly runtimes. So you're shipping an assembly language model, an intermediate language, where have we seen intermediate languages before, for the web itself. So then what if .NET didn't produce IL? What if it had produced WebAssembly? And then I did this on .NET 8, .NET Run. It's going to take longer because it's going to have to go compile the application to IL, then run the IL through a thing called Clang, and then generate native code, and then turn it into WebAssembly, and then it's going to run it not on .NET, but on a thing called WASM time. And WASM time is going to go and run that app bundle, which is not a .dll, but a .wasm file. And WASM time will run my WASI console.wasm, and it will say, hello, WASI.wasm. It's not on an operating system. There's no Linux, there's no Windows. It's just an interpreted runtime. And if I go down there into here, start boop, ba-doo, there's a 25 meg WASM file that is agnostic. Processor non-specific, browser non-specific, everybody non-specific. It's just pure, ready to run with no judgment call about what it should run on. So then we have to ask ourselves, well, how is that useful? What do web applications do? They write to the file system. They talk to databases. They make HTTP calls. They look up network things, right? These are all different things that WASI would need to do. Those are almost like, system calls or Win32 APIs that we could all agree on. But we can just all agree on them. We could make an interface. We could make a WebAssembly system interface, a WASI, if you will, that everyone could agree on that said, all right, here's how I'm going to do DNS, and here's how I'm going to do this, how I'm going to do that, without talking about the operating system. So we're effectively making another operating system, except in this case, it's completely ephemeral, and it's just an implementation detail about what's underneath it. So then I could have Go and Rust and C and Java and whatever all produce .wasis, or .wasms rather, and then run them in the cloud. Run them on serverless, run them here and there. Now this is what I did in the hotel just before I got here. So this has never been done before, at least unless someone in the audience yells out after. I totally did that before, and that's fine. Just wait until everyone's left to yell that out, because that would make me feel very sad, because we literally think we just figured this out. Now, when I say we, I mean .NET just kind of got on board. I'm sure that non-.NET people have been doing this for like weeks. So deep in the bowels of Docker on Windows, there is a section here that switches from the standard Docker images way of holding things, which is Docker, and then to the more standard containerd. So I'm going to turn that on. And just before I hit apply, I just want to show you, if I type Docker images, you see all of these Docker images. This is all the stuff I've been working on. Okay, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to apply and restart. So we're switching to the standard as opposed to the how Docker wants everyone to do it. We're getting to the here's how we all agreed as a community that we were going to do things. And then containerd is going to then roll in here. We're going to start the engine, and I'm going to type Docker images. And you can see I've only got a couple, including the one I did 2 hours ago, right there. Because it's a different thing. Now, those files are not deleted. They're just in a parallel universe. Okay, it's okay. Everyone's like, why did you delete all your files? It's okay. They're in the other universe, different cinematic universe. Then you go into beta features and you turn on enable WASM. Turn on enable WASM. And this is now a way of saying to Docker, I don't even want you to use any base, any from. I'm instead going to say Docker, Docker run using the containerd v1 WASM on the edge runtime with the platform not being Linux, not being anything, but being wasi.wasm right here. And then I want you to run the container called .NET WASM. Now let's look at that container real quick though, because I think I put it over in, let me check. I made a Docker file. There you go. Check out my Docker file. Look at how simple this is. Let's open it and make it big so people can see. From scratch, blank slate. Not from Ubuntu, not from Alpine, from scratch, new VHD. Copy the WASI console.wasm, the one that I make when I go build, and just copy it right into dot. not even into a folder called app. There's not even any folders. It's an empty disk with one file in it called WASI console.wasm. Okay? Then we say WASI console docker run. And we say docker run. And we tell it we want to use a specific runtime. So we've effectively gone from the runtime inside, being inside the Docker container, because with the runtime in that case would be Linux, or whatever flavor of Linux I decide. All the syscalls are in there. We've externalized them. So now this agreement, this runtime IO containerd WASM edge lives on the outside. Okay, so all the like, what can you do? Console.writeline, HTTP, it's all externalized. It's all standardized. And I can go and ship that little tiny thing, and now I just ran a .NET 8 application that has no .NET runtime, no .NET anything, shipped as WASM, and ran it in Docker without an operating system. Isn't that cool? This is the part where you clap, even if you don't understand. It doesn't matter. It just make me feel better. Thank you. I realize that it's gauche to ask for it, but I worked really hard. So that's 9 megs. That's cool. Why is 9 megs useful? Density. So now think about all your, if you could just throw this into any cloud, you throw this into any container, you can have not 200 meg or 300 meg containers, you could have 10 meg containers, you can have a lot more on disk, the memory footprint is going to be less. There's nothing in there to break into. The thing that they would now try to break into would be the WASM runtime itself. And if we all harden that and keep working on that as a group, then you would just need to redeploy that container, and it would be even more hardened. Now, this isn't saying that WASM is the future of .NET or anything like that, but it's trying to show you why I like working on .NET and C# so much, is that it's so freaking flexible. I can run it on a microcontroller, not a microprocessor, a microcontroller, like a small 16 meg controller, like a Meadow, Wilderness Labs Meadow. I can run it on a Mac, I can run it on an iPhone, I can run it on Xbox, I can run it on any kind of machine I want. I can now produce, with this experimental workload, WebAssembly, and then I can even run it without a distro on the experimental WASM support. So then when new extensions for cloud-enabled applications that have all of the kind of Kubernetes things that you want, all of the creature comforts of a cloud-native application, this is yet another option for you to go and run your applications. And then if you combine that, and here's the finale that I just made up. There wasn't actually a finale. I thought I was going to get applause before, and I had to ask for it. So now I'll try another finale. Let's go and switch our Docker engine back to a previous one, which was not containerd. Now, if I was going to ship something that wasn't just a bunch of hello worlds, because I've been doing a bunch of hello worlds in this presentation, we'll switch back to our previous version here, and I'll go and I'll say Docker images, which is cool. We're back, our parallel universe. And then we'll go into Visual Studio. Where'd you go, VS? Oh, you're on another monitor. Boop, 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 boop. There we go. Open up this application, which keeps insisting on coming onto another monitor. My apologies. Boop, 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 boop. Okay. And this is an application that is a large distributed application with shopping carts and catalogs and multiple APIs and a front end and service defaults and everything that you would need to be a sophisticated cloud native application running on, in this case, .NET Aspire. And let's go and run this and say start without debugging. And then I'm going to go back over here and watch our containers in Docker. We're doing this without Kubernetes. See them all start up? Multiple containers, multiple projects, full version of Postgres, pgadmin for Postgres, populating the database, bringing up an entire file new company across multiple containers. Now, I, as a person, could think about what do I want these containers to be on? Do I want them to be on Linux? Do I want them to be on Alpine, on Windows containers, on WASI? Maybe I want to just have the shopping cart basket be on WASI and see how it performs. I've got flexibility now. We just fired up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 microservices, including Postgres and Postgres admin. I can go and log into those. You can see now, boom, there's the database. Here's the catalog and the ordering databases, all just fired up and all running now on these machines. On a laptop, I'm not doing it in the cloud right now, I'm in airplane mode. And then I will go and I'm gonna hit Control-C here. And I want you to watch everything go away. Boop, doop, doop, boop, boop. And all the containers get cleaned up. And now nothing is running. Docker PS. Boom. Isn't that cool? On a laptop. Very happy, very fun. So there's a lot of really fun stuff happening right now. Again, this is not a .NET specific talk. I'm just a .NET fanboy. All the things that I just showed you, most of the things you can do in Go and other languages and things like that. But I want to show you how fundamentally baked in that .NET, .NET 8, .NET 9 are for the future. If you have any questions, feel free to find me later. And then I want to encourage you to go to the next talk that Dave is going to be doing on taking everything that I just did and moving it then into the cloud. So you're going to be doing Docker, containers, and then what did I do? Ship it. I did everything local. He'll be doing it all in the cloud. So thank you so much.